Joshua Miller pulled his horse to a stop, the animal's breath clouding in the frigid Montana air. The first heavy snow of 1885 was falling fast, coating his shoulders and hat in white as he sat motionless, watching the small cabin through its frost-rimmed window. Inside, a woman and two children huddled around a rough table, a single candle casting their shadows large against the wall. They were dividing what looked to be scraps from someone else's meal. His gloved hands tightened on the reins as the small boy, couldn't be more than 6, pushed his meager portion toward his sister. Something tightened in Joshua's chest. 3 years a widower had left him well acquainted with an empty table, with the hollow sound of one plate, one cup, but children shouldn't know hunger. He dismounted, boots crunching through fresh snow, through gaps in the warped boards. He could see the cabin offered little protection against the coming winter. The roof sagged dangerously, patched in places with what looked like pieces of crate wood. His knock startled them. The woman came to the door, thin fingers gripping the frame as if for support. Her face was drawn but dignified, eyes wary as she positioned herself to shield the children behind her skirts. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, removing his hat. "Mr. Yarmiller." Her voice revealed surprise that he knew her name. He looked past her to the children's hollow cheeks, to the nearly empty cupboard visible beyond. Then up at the ceiling, where snow drifted through gaps onto the dirt floor. "Get your things," Joshua said, his voice rough from disuse. "You're coming home. Winter's setting in proper, and this cabin won't hold." Sarah Bennett's face showed the battle between pride and maternal desperation. Her daughter coughed softly behind her, and whatever argument she might have made died unspoken. "We have little to bring," she said finally, giving him a single tight nod. "Then it won't take long," Joshua replied, stepping inside to help. The blizzard worsened as they left town, wind driving the snow horizontal across the trail. Sarah sat beside Joshua on the wagon bench, her children huddled under buffalo robes in the back. Their few possessions: a trunk, a rocking chair with broken spindles, and some worn quilts secured beside them. "Your husband," Joshua said, eyes fixed on the fading trail. "Mining accident." "Yes," Sarah pulled her threadbare coat tighter. "A year ago come spring. Left debts I couldn't pay." Joshua nodded, understanding both what she said and didn't say. "Pine Creek took care of its own unless rumors started, unless someone fell from grace. And you lost your wife." She ventured after another mile passed in silence. 3 winters passed. Childbirth, each word fell like stone. Lost them both. Before Sarah could respond, a sickening crack cut through the wind's howl. The right front wheel splintered as it dropped into a snow-covered washout. The wagon listed dangerously. Joshua jumped down, assessing the damage with a glance. "Wheel's gone. We're still 2 miles out." He looked at the rapidly disappearing trail, then at the darkening sky. "We walk from here." He lifted Thomas from the wagon, wrapping him in one of the buffalo robes. Sarah gathered Emma in similar fashion. The girl's face was flushed with cold, eyes drooping with exhaustion. "Hold tight to my neck, boy," Joshua told Thomas, settling him against his shoulder. "We've got some ground to cover." They trudged through deepening snow, following the barely visible fence line marking Joshua's property. By the time his ranch house appeared through the swirling white, Sarah's legs were numb, her arms aching from carrying Emma. The house stood solid against the storm, 2 stories of sturdy timber with a wide porch. Inside was clean but sparse. No decorations softened the practical furniture. No pictures hung on the walls. The hearth was cold, like no one had been home for days. Joshua busied himself with the fire, while Sarah settled the children close to the growing warmth. "Why?" she asked simply. When the children had drifted to sleep, Joshua continued arranging logs in the hearth, not meeting her eyes. "This isn't charity," he said finally. "This is what neighbors do. Anyone with sense would do the same." Sarah nodded, though he wasn't looking. Her gaze traveled around the room, landing on a woman's shawl still hanging on a peg near the door, as if its owner had just stepped out and might return any moment. Sarah couldn't sleep. The children lay peacefully by the hearth, but her mind raced with the day's sudden turn. Past midnight. She ventured to the kitchen for water and found Joshua sitting alone at the table, a small lamp burning low. He turned something in his fingers, a gold wedding band, different from the one he wore. He looked up at her approach but didn't hide it. "Rebecca's," he offered quietly. "I keep meaning to put it away," Sarah nodded, understanding the power of such objects. "I still have Michael's watch," she admitted. "Doesn't work anymore." A simple confession, but it opened a door between them. Words came easier then, how his wife died, bringing their son into the world, neither surviving the night. How her husband's death revealed mining investments that left her destitute and whispered about. "The town turned quickly," she said, tracing patterns on the wooden tabletop. "Yesterday's neighbors become strangers when there's scandal attached." Joshua's reply was interrupted by heavy pounding at the door. Both startled. Then Joshua rose, motioning for her to stay seated. Mr. Daniels stood on the porch, snow coating his heavy coat, his face tight with displeasure. "Miller," he said curtly. "Word travels fast." "Taking in the Bennett woman. Bringing neighbors through a storm," Joshua corrected. "Not inviting him inside. You know what they say about her husband's dealings, about her part in it." Daniels lowered his voice, though not enough to prevent Sarah from hearing. "The Wallace brothers are reconsidering their cattle contract with you. Tompkins, too." "Is that so?" Joshua's voice remained level. "Just warning you, as a friend. Harboring the disgraced Bennett woman has consequences." Joshua stood straighter. "Then they can take their business elsewhere. Good night, Mr. Daniels." He closed the door firmly and turned to find Sarah watching him, her expression questioning the cost of his choice. "I make my own judgments," he said simply. "Always have." Sarah studied his face, realizing that this quiet, solitary man had just placed himself between her family and the town's judgment at considerable cost. Days melted together, marked by routine rather than calendar. Joshua showed Thomas how to feed the horses each morning, patiently demonstrating how to approach from the front. Speak softly, offer the feed flat-palmed. The boy's small hands trembled with cold but remained determined. "My daddy had a mule," Thomas told him one morning, his breath clouding. "Not horses." "Mules are smarter than horses," Joshua replied, surprising himself with the conversation. "Harder workers, too," Thomas considered this. "Then why do you have horses? Sometimes we choose things for how they make us feel, not just what they can do." Joshua surprised himself again. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken so many words together. Inside, Sarah had established order in his long-neglected home. Meals appeared at regular times. The floors were swept, windows shone. Emma followed her mother like a shadow, learning each task with solemn attention. One afternoon, Joshua found Sarah examining the broken spindles of her rocking chair. "I can fix that," he offered, running a hand along the damaged wood. "You're a carpenter?" she asked. "Just handy with tools." He carried the chair to his workshop attached to the barn. Emma trailed after them, watching intently as he selected wood for new spindles. "My daddy made this chair," she told him as he worked. "Can you make it remember him still?" Joshua paused, considering. "Yes," he said finally. "We'll keep the arms he carved, just replace what's broken." When supplies ran low, they made their first journey to town together. The children sat between them on the wagon bench, their presence a buffer against what waited in Pine Creek. Whispers followed them down the street. Women gathered in doorways, conversation stopping as they passed. Men nodded curtly to Joshua, but looked through Sarah as if she were invisible. At the general store, Frank Williams stepped from behind the counter, blocking their way. "Joshua," he said stiffly, "perhaps Mrs. Bennett would be more comfortable waiting outside while you conduct your business." Joshua's jaw tightened. "You've known me 15 years, Frank." The words came quiet but firm. "Never known me to leave family waiting in the cold." The word family hung in the air between them. Frank hesitated, then stepped aside. That evening, returning to the ranch, Joshua noticed Sarah had reorganized his kitchen cupboards. The plates and cups he'd kept haphazardly were now neatly arranged, some of her own things integrated with his. He paused, studying the change, then left it unchanged. Something about their mingled possessions felt right. Late January brought unexpected warmth, melting snow into rushing streams. Joshua woke at dawn to find Sarah already outside, digging trenches to redirect the rising creek water threatening the eastern pasture. He pulled on his boots and coat, joining her without comment. They worked side by side, the labor connecting them more than words. When the children joined them after breakfast, they became a chain, Joshua digging, Sarah clearing debris, Emma carrying small rocks for a diversion wall, Thomas fetching tools. They worked through morning into afternoon, finding an unspoken rhythm. When Thomas slipped in mud and sat looking shocked, Joshua surprised himself by laughing a genuine sound he barely recognized as his own. Later, water safely diverted. They sat exhausted on the porch steps. Sarah's hands were raw and blistered. Without thinking, Joshua took them in his, examining the damage. "You didn't have to work yourself bloody," he said. "It's your home." She didn't withdraw her hands. "I don't take shelter without earning my place." That night, with children asleep, Joshua sat by the fire carving a small wooden horse. He'd started it days ago, working in moments of quiet. The sound of Sarah's approach made him glance up. "For Thomas?" she asked, settling nearby with mending. Joshua nodded, knife moving in sure strokes along the wood. "Boy needs something of his own." They sat in companionable silence until Sarah spoke again. "I don't know how to accept help without shame," she admitted, eyes on her work rather than him. Joshua set down his carving. "Then don't call it help," he said finally. "Call it starting over. We both need that." Her eyes met his, understanding passing between them. Outside, snow began again, softer now. As Joshua leaned forward, their first kiss was tentative, questioning. Their second was an answer. February brought clear skies and bitter cold. Sunday service at Pine Creek's small church offered the only social gathering most residents attended. Through winter, Joshua had rarely gone since Rebecca's death, but now he stood outside the white clapboard building, helping Emma and Thomas down from the wagon. Several parishioners nodded cautiously as they passed. Others turned away. The hour in church passed without incident, but as they gathered to leave, Harrison Blake, the town banker, cornered Joshua while Sarah waited with the children by the wagon. "Bold move, bringing her to church," Harrison said, loud enough for nearby folks to hear. "Woman whose husband swindled half the mining investors in town." "That's her husband, not her," Joshua replied evenly. "Wives know their husbands' affairs," Harrison countered. "She's unfit company, Miller." "Surprised you can't see it." Throughout the following week, the consequences became clear. 2 cattle contracts canceled. The blacksmith suddenly too busy to repair Joshua's plow. Emma came home from her first day at school with tears streaming down her face, refusing to say what had happened. On Thursday, Robert Collins, Joshua's friend since boyhood, rode out to the ranch. They sat on the porch, passing a coffee cup between them as Robert delivered the town's verdict. "It's nothing personal against the woman," Robert insisted, "but folks have long memories. You're tying yourself to scandal. They're just people falling on hard times," Joshua said. "Maybe so. But your business is suffering. You're standing too." Robert leaned forward. "Send them on their way come spring. This will blow over." That night, doubt crept into Joshua's heart. Standing by the window, watching Sarah hang laundry in the yard, he wondered if he was doing her family a service or a disservice by binding their fate to his. When she came inside, he couldn't meet her eyes directly. "Perhaps when spring comes," he said, voice strained, "you might find better prospects elsewhere." Her face showed the betrayal his words inflicted. She stood motionless in the doorway to the children's room, back straight despite the blow. "We've outstayed charity before," she said quietly. "We'll begin packing tomorrow." Dawn found Joshua standing at Rebecca's grave in the small cemetery behind the church. The eastern sky showed first hints of spring, pale gold washing across untouched snow. He'd come alone, seeking clarity. "I'm afraid," he admitted to the silent stone, "not of loving again, of failing again." Wind stirred the bare branches above. I couldn't protect you. Don't know if I can protect them. Back at the ranch, Sarah methodically folded the children's few clothes, explaining they would leave when the weather turned. Emma helped solemnly. Thomas stared out the window toward the barn where Joshua had been teaching him to groom the horses. Will Mr. Miller come with us? He asked. No, sweetheart. Sarah kept her voice steady. This is his home. But he needs us, Thomas insisted with a child's certainty. He didn't smile before. Now he does. Before Sarah could answer, Emma called out in alarm. Thomas had suddenly gone pale, swaying where he stood. By the time Sarah reached him, he burned with fever, collapsing in her arms. Joshua returned to find Sarah bathing Thomas's forehead with cool cloths. The boy's breathing shallow and rapid. Fever came on sudden, she explained, fear evident beneath her calm exterior. He was fine this morning. Joshua rode immediately for the doctor, but returned alone. He's delivering a baby 20 miles west, he reported grimly. Left medicine and instructions. Through the night, they worked as one, Joshua preparing the remedies the doctor had provided, Sarah coaxing spoonfuls between Thomas's parched lips. Hour after hour they kept vigil, speaking little but moving in instinctive cooperation. Near dawn, Thomas's fever broke. As pale light filtered through the window, the boy opened his eyes, weak but present. Exhausted, Sarah rested her head briefly against Joshua's shoulder. I can't lose another family, he confessed, the night's fear breaking something open inside him. And I can't stay as your charity, she whispered back. Joshua took her hand across Thomas's sleeping form. You belong here, all of you. His calloused thumb traced circles on her palm. Not as charity as my heart's choice. Sunday morning found the church pews filled early, anticipation humming through the congregation. Joshua's entrance created an immediate silence, every head turning to watch his deliberate walk to the front pew. He sat alone, hat on his knee. After service, as people began to disperse, he stood. Might I say something? The minister nodded, curiosity evident. I've sat quiet while this town judged Sarah Bennett, Joshua began, voice carrying to the back pews. Judged her children too. Denied them basic Christian charity. Several people shifted uncomfortably. You call yourselves godly while children go hungry. His question hung in the air. Judge her, judge me first for every mistake I've made, and there are plenty. He looked around the silent church. Her husband's failings aren't hers, but my failings are mine if I stand by while good people suffer. He settled his hat on his head. You're welcome at my table any time. Whether I'm welcome at yours doesn't much concern me anymore. He returned to the ranch to find Harrison Blake's buggy in the yard. Inside, the banker stood with papers spread before Sarah at the kitchen table. Miller, Harrison acknowledged coldly, explaining to Mrs. Bennett that her husband's debts still stand. The mining company is preparing to place liens. Those debts are settled, Joshua interrupted. Sarah's head snapped up. But Joshua reached into his coat, removing a folded document. Paid them 2 days ago, full amount. You had no right, Sarah began, rising. Not charity, he said firmly. Investment. He placed another document beside the first, a deed with both their names. Partnership in the ranch. Equal shares. He looked directly at Harrison. Unless there's other business, Mr. Blake. The banker gathered his papers stiffly. This changes nothing about how the town sees her. L'État, then the town needs spectacles, Joshua replied, showing him to the door. When they were alone, Sarah touched the deed with trembling fingers. Why would you do this? Because a person needs solid ground to stand on, he answered. And I need a partner more than hired help. Sarah studied his face, seeing truth there. Not for myself, she said finally, but for the home our children deserve. Her emphasis on our sealed something between them. Our children, Joshua. April transformed the land. Wildflowers appeared in vibrant clusters across the greening pastures. The ranch house expansion that Joshua had begun now neared completion. 2 new bedrooms and an enlarged kitchen. The sound of hammers a constant rhythm. Sarah looked up from her garden to see several wagons approaching. She tensed until recognizing the minister's wife leading the procession. The women brought food and quilts. The men carried tools, ready to help with the building. It wasn't the entire town, but it was a beginning. "Pastor spoke strong words last Sunday," the minister's wife explained. Hands busy arranging food on the outdoor table Joshua had built. About community and second chances. By afternoon, the house addition gained walls and a roof, many hands making quick work. Children played in the yard, Emma and Thomas no longer isolated. Sarah caught Joshua watching her across the bustle, his eyes asking a question. She nodded, understanding without words. 1 week later, they stood together in their newly completed home. A simple ceremony, witnessed by the children and those neighbors who had extended friendship. Thomas proudly gave away his mother, standing straight-backed beside her until Joshua took her hand. Emma scattered wildflowers along the floorboards. "Love after loss isn't betrayal of what was," the minister told them. "It's testament to the heart's capacity for renewal." As evening approached, the last guests departed. The four of them, now properly a family, stood in the doorway of their home, looking out at land turned golden by sunset. "It feels like we've been building this home my whole life without knowing it," Sarah said. Emma leaning sleepily against her side. Joshua, Thomas half asleep in his arms, looked around at the walls they'd raised together. "Some things take the hard way to be built right." As dusk deepened toward night, they settled the children into their new rooms. Later, alone together, Joshua removed his old wedding band. He placed it carefully in a small carved box on their dresser, not forgotten, but no longer a barrier between past and future. Sarah covered his hand with hers as he closed the lid. Together they crossed the threshold of their bedroom, closing the door on the coming night. Outside their window, spring wind carried promise across fields that would soon grow green with new life. Inside, a family slept under one roof, sheltered by walls built twice, once with timber, and again with forgiveness, courage, and love that had traveled the hard road home.